Joining me now is Jillian Shaw. Jillian and I, of course, every once in a while we get together and do one of these great video casts. How are you doing, Jillian?
I am doing just great, Steve. It's a busy month.
It
And are you getting ready to get into the iPhone lineups?
No, I'm not going to get in the iPhone lineups. I thought about it, but then I looked at my wallet, and it's too
Well,
expensive.
apparently only you, Steve, because
Uh,
as you'll note, Apple said that the pre-orders for the iPhone 5 have exceeded pre-orders for any phone
and
to date.
I thought that they probably were pulling the wool over our eyes a little bit with selling it out in an hour because I thought, oh, what they did is they limited supply a little bit, and then so that it would sell out fast to make it seem, more, like the front of the line tickets, things selling out quick. But it turns out that they've actually taken pre-orders for 2 million units, which is staggering.
2 million in 24 hours, Steve,
Staggering.
which is even more staggering. And what is that? More than double for the iPhone 4S. So,
Now I'm hearing
so
that,
much for thinking that, people weren't just going to dig deeper into their wallets to
yeah,
update their iPhones or start out with a new one.
and they're not cheap. They're $50 or so more than the last one, which was a fairly expensive phone.
$50 or more for an unlocked version. It starts at what? 699,
Yeah.
799, 899. So for the 64 gigabyte version, Steve, you're unloading with tax like close to $1,000.
Now,
I
do
mean,
you think
you
that
could
with
buy a couple of small laptop computers for that.
Do you think people have to go to the 64 gig version because of the move to cloud computing? Do you think that with if you're buying in on the whole Apple program and you've got iTunes in the cloud, you've got all of your photos being served on the cloud. If you're doing all those things, do you think that local storage is that important, and maybe the 16 or even the 32 gig version will be more than adequate?
I'd like to think so, Steve, because I was pricing them out and thinking I'd like to buy an unlocked one. So, of course, I would prefer to buy the cheapest unlocked one, which is 16 gigs.
Mm-hmm.
But even though I use the iCloud and I'm pretty well synced, I run into storage problems even with my 32 gig iPhone.
I've got a
So,
64 and I run into storage problems too.
hmm?
I got the 64 and I run into storage problems as well. I do.
You see, maybe we're just not iClouding enough, Steve. But I
Yeah.
I can tell you, I can fill that up pretty quickly. And so when I bought the latest iPad, I got the largest version.
Yes.
I think I'd be tempted to do that with the iPhone, but boy, that's a lot of bottles to return, Steve, to come up with that kind of money.
Well, when I think about the LTE built in, I'm wondering if I might, if things that I listen to now and I download, like podcasts that I download for walking the dog, they're not large, but they're 80, 90 megabytes each, I guess. I'm just thinking probably. Maybe I would stream those instead of downloading them because with the LTE network, it's not going to be, as long as my data plan supports it, we're not going to have speed issues.
Well, exactly. But then that depends on where you are because I
Yeah.
do that, Steve. One of the things I load up my iPhone with is music, and I subscribe to that RDO service, so it's all you can use music for something
Mm-hmm.
like 9.99 a month, which is great. And it is live streamed. But when, for example, if I'm driving up to Whistler and you go in and out of the pockets of coverage, if I want to have music, I have it synced to my mobile. So I have it basically on my iPhone so I can continue to listen to it when I'm outside of coverage range.
Mm.
So, this whole thing with LTE and storage and live streaming is great if you never go outside of the service area. And of course, for LTE, the service area isn't that large right now. I mean, it's urban centers. We're lucky to have it here in Vancouver. But I talked to a pal in Edmonton and he doesn't have it yet.
Yeah.
So we're not quite at the point where you can go anywhere and expect to be able to live stream your podcasts or music, movies, or whatever you want.
I'm going to throw something from left field at you. Next week is Social Media Week in Vancouver, and I see that you are one of the headliners in the journalism. In a journalism presentation of kind of new world meets the old world, digital world versus old school. Now, I asked some of the organizers today which you represented because I was hoping they would say you were the old school, but they actually said that you sit on the fence.
Well, that's great to hear, Steve, because I just don't like that old media label. I mean,
So,
for a lot of reasons, but mostly, traditional media. There is traditional media, and that's, of course, as you know, where I had my start at a time when, what we were doing is writing stories that landed on people's doorsteps first thing in the morning in a print edition, and that was pretty much it. But that changed a long time ago for me and a lot of other journalists who had their start in print. So I would say, from what I do now, Steve, um, probably probably it's now skewing over to that I'm doing more online and more
Mm-hmm.
digital media than I'm actually writing in print. So for every, like, for instance, today as an example, I'm writing a story that's going in print, but it will be going in print, it'll be going online. Um, it is in addition to writing a couple of blog posts, in addition to creating a video that I'll be also posting online. So when you add that all up, Steve, yeah, a lot of my life is digital.
When you think about your work, when you go into working on any story, what is your first thought of delivery? I mean, because when I used to do my TV show, when I was preparing, I was always thinking about what is this story going to look like when I put it on the air, when I put it on TV. And now the first thing I think is, how can I use this? How many times can I repurpose it? Can I use it as a video cast like we're doing right now? Can I use it on the radio show? Should I be writing about it? What sites are going to want it to be posted on? So I'm thinking about my content as far as always with reflected in how I'm going to deliver it. When you think of a story, when you hear something interesting, what does your mind first go to? Does your mind first go to online delivery, or does it still go to print delivery?
I think my mind first goes to what I can do with it online because you can do so much more. I mean, for example, the story I'm working on today is about an interactive digital exhibit up at UBC. Well, it's hard to be very interactive in print. So I'm going to write a story and I'll use words to describe it and to tell the story of this great Vancouver company. And we'll have a photo, but that's what we can do with sort of with print. But once I go online, then I can actually walk people through. This is what it looks like. This is what it was like. This is the technology. Here's behind the scenes. I crawl in behind a screen to see the cameras. And
And you'll just use your
just
iPhone
carrying
to
around my
record.
iPhone, I
Yeah.
can bring that all to our readers and our viewers.
And what about the professionalism? And I don't mean that this from a negative sense, but like when you learned to write, you guys had editor. How many editors would read all of your stories? I mean, everything had to be just so in the newspaper, right? It had to be beyond reproach. But you're in a much more messy environment when you're just sitting there shooting a video and kind of talking along and putting up these organic videos. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm a little bit divided. I readers and viewers on the people who follow my digital life blog are, I have to say, thankfully very forgiving. And they realize that I'm not a TV producer,
Mm-hmm.
and I just take along what I do with my videos. I just take my iPhone, and I mean sometimes I'll shoot with a proper camera, but often I'll just use my iPhone as it's kind of recording the interview for me. But
Yeah.
instead of just recording it on tape the way I used to do, or just for audio, now I'll record it on video, and then I may just share some of that. So it's kind of like inviting the viewer and the reader into the interview with me. And yeah, rough around the edges, and my video editing skills, are always a work in progress, Steve. But that's only for me. That's me as a content producer and as a writer. Um, Overall, for our business, and the media, we're now a multimedia business. We're not just a newspaper business. I think that we do have to up our game, and we are, because if you go on the Vancouver Sun website, we have video experts who are our photographers and videographers who take TV quality video and do the television quality editing and post it on our website. So certainly for our sort of the videos where it's a more formal approach to telling the story, you do get that quality, and I think it's important, and I think that we as is in the media business have to be striving to do more of that all the time.
When we were looking at the different stories that we were going to cover this week, the one that caught my eye was some Netflix executives. And it's interesting, as Netflix has released their iPhone 5 app today, and in Canada, Netflix does quite well. So I imagine their iPhone 5 app is going to do quite well up here. But they sure gave a blast to our internet service providers.
Oh, they just rip strips off them, Steve. And Netflix hasn't been reticent about in its criticism of Canada's internet service in the
Yeah.
past. I mean, we have a couple of a couple of real drawbacks that impact live streaming entertainment, of course, which Netflix is. And one of the biggest ones is that we're using more and more internet bandwidth, right? I mean, we're
Mm-hmm.
watching movies like 10 years ago. How much internet bandwidth were people using? I can't, I actually there are stats on that, but and I can't remember them off the top of my head, but it's a staggering increase. So
Yes.
what might have been enough internet usage for you in, say, 10 years ago isn't nearly enough today. And there's some critics who say that the internet service providers aren't keeping pace because what they're doing is charging people on a usage-based model. So once you hit a certain cap, it costs you a lot more
Mm-hmm.
to get your internet. So if you're a movie watcher or you want to give up your television cable to get all your entertainment online, you could be paying an increasing fees, sort of pay per use for your internet. And of course, that has people like Netflix executives up in arms.
Yeah, and that's gonna and they actually likened us to third world countries. We have third world access to the internet, and I must say that I agree with them pretty wholeheartedly that the Canadian internet service providers have been very slow to move and very quick to look for gravy wherever they can.
Well, I just had a reader talk about getting internet service wireless. This is wireless service in Ireland, and it was all you could use for a flat rate, considerably lower than ours. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm paying right now for my daughter's wireless bill in the UK, and I kind of budgeted around $100 a month,
Mm-hmm.
and for unlimited, basically talk, text, and data. And what it's actually turning out to be, Steve, is more like $30 or $35 a month. So
Really?
that is quite a big change. It's quite a big difference from what we're paying here in Canada.
Absolutely. Jillian's work can be found at thevancouversun.com, both her very nicely and crafted prose and her slightly organic video is all available there. Jillian, thanks. We'll do this again next week.
Great talking to you.